A caddy just broke the one rule that holds every professional golf partnership together, and what he revealed about the argument that ended his relationship with one of the most powerful players in the sport is going to change the way you understand everything that has been happening inside Rory McIlroy's game for the last 18 months. This is not a contractual dispute. This is not a creative differences separation. This is a 12-year partnership, one of the longest, most decorated player-caddy relationships in the modern era of professional golf, ending over a specific argument on a specific golf course about a specific decision that Rory McIlroy made that his caddy believed was wrong. And according to sources with knowledge of what was said, 26 players on the PGA Tour have now heard some version of what that argument contained. What they heard is not flattering to anyone. Honestly, I think what Harry Diamond revealed, intentionally or not, about the final weeks of his partnership with Rory McIlroy tells us more about why McIlroy has not won a major championship since 2014 than anything Rory himself has ever said publicly. Is a caddy ever justified in going public about a private argument with a player, or did Harry Diamond just commit the one betrayal professional golf never forgives? Drop it in the comments right now. And if you want the inside story on what was actually said and what it means for Rory McIlroy's career from this point forward, subscribe, because this conversation just became the most important one in professional golf.
To understand why this revelation hits the way it does, you need to understand what a player-caddy relationship actually is at the elite level of professional golf. It is not an employment arrangement, not in the way a normal job works. A caddy at the top level of the PGA Tour carries more than a bag. He carries the psychological architecture of a player's competitive week. He knows the yardages, the wind reads, the club selections. But the elite caddies, the ones who work alongside top 10 players, know something far more valuable than yardage. They know the player's mental state. They know when the player is lying to himself about his swing. They know when the confidence is real and when it is performed. They know what the player will not say to a coach, will not say to a sports psychologist, will not say to a wife or manager or agent. They know the truth. And the rule, the unbreakable, unspoken rule of the caddy world, is that truth stays in the bag. Harry Diamond has been Rory McIlroy's caddy since 2017, 8 years, 34 PGA Tour victories during that partnership, McIlroy's most decorated stretch of professional golf since his major winning peak, the Masters runners-up finish in 2022, the career Grand Slam pursuit that has defined and haunted McIlroy's public narrative for a decade. Diamond was not just there for all of that. Diamond was inside all of that. The most famous caddy departure in the modern era of professional golf was Steve Williams walking away from Tiger Woods in 2011. That separation was bitter, public, and eventually produced a book with details about their relationship that changed the way the sport understood Tiger's competitive psychology. Williams was asked once whether he regretted going public. His answer was that the truth has its own weight, and carrying it alone eventually becomes impossible. What came out of that partnership's end reshaped the narrative around one of the sport's greatest careers. What came out of this one will do the same. The argument that ended McIlroy and Diamond's partnership did not happen at Augusta. It did not happen at a major. It happened at an event most of the golf media was not focused on closely enough, during a week when McIlroy's body language on the course told the people watching carefully that something beyond a bad ball-striking run was wrong, something structural, something between the player and the man standing next to him. Diamond knows exactly what that something was, and now pieces of it are out.
Harry Diamond is not a headline chaser. He is not a social media figure. He is not the kind of caddy who gives long interviews about his player's inner world or cultivates a media profile to set up his next bag opportunity. He is, by every account inside the caddy community, someone who values discretion the way a surgeon values sterile conditions, as the non-negotiable foundation of everything else. Which is exactly why the fact that he said what he said to the people he said it to landed the way it did. He did not go on a podcast, he did not call a reporter, he told the truth to the wrong room. According to multiple sources with direct knowledge of the conversations in question, people inside the caddy world and connected to the player advisory structure of the PGA Tour, Diamond made specific statements about the final weeks of his partnership with McIlroy to a group that included other caddies and at minimum 2 player representatives. His statements were not a venting session about logistics or contract terms. They were a specific account of an argument about decision-making, about who, in the final moments of competitive pressure, Rory McIlroy actually listens to. The answer Diamond gave was not Harry Diamond. The argument that ended the partnership centered on a specific moment, a club selection, or more precisely a target selection, on a hole that mattered, where Diamond gave his read, gave his reasoning, gave the full weight of 8 years of knowledge about this player's game under pressure, and McIlroy went the other way, not because of a different yardage calculation, not because of wind. McIlroy went the other way because someone else in the days leading up to that round had told him something different, and McIlroy chose that voice. Diamond's position, stated explicitly according to sources who heard his account, was that this was not the first time, that it had become a pattern over the final 18 months of their partnership, that McIlroy's decision-making structure under competitive pressure had shifted in a way that effectively removed the caddy from the most important conversations on the course, that the person standing next to him had become, in the moments that mattered most, a bag carrier rather than a partner. Imagine 8 years of carrying a player's competitive career. Imagine being the person who knows his swing tendencies under fourth-round pressure better than any coach alive. Imagine watching him stand over a shot you have read correctly, with a club you know is right, to a target you have calculated with 8 years of accumulated knowledge, and choose differently. Not because he disagrees with your read, because someone who was not on that fairway 3 days ago told him something that sounded better. Imagine that happening not once, not twice, but consistently over 18 months, while the major championship drought continues and the sport's entire media infrastructure asks week after week why the best player of his generation cannot close. That is what Diamond described, in a room that was not supposed to stay quiet. The detonation of that account is not in the specific club that was chosen or the target that was missed. The detonation is in what it implies about the architecture of Rory McIlroy's decision-making at the moments his career has needed him most. You have watched Rory McIlroy stand on the 72nd hole of major championships with the trophy in reach. You have watched him at Augusta, at Royal Portrush, at courses where his game was objectively good enough to win. You have asked the same question the rest of the golf world has asked for 11 years. Why does it not close? What is the mechanism that opens in the final moments and lets it get away? Harry Diamond just told people in that room what he believes the mechanism is, and what he said is that the problem is not the swing. The problem is the voice Rory listens to when the swing is under pressure. Is Harry Diamond's account a legitimate grievance from a partner who watched a player self-destruct for 18 months, or is a caddy who breaks the confidentiality of a player partnership, the one person in professional golf who deserves zero sympathy regardless of what happened? And the harder question, if Diamond is right about the decision-making pattern, does Rory McIlroy ever win another major? Drop it in the comments, I read every single one. What makes this account impossible for the tour to quietly absorb is not the drama of a broken partnership. It is the specific nature of what Diamond described, because it connects directly to something the golf media has been circling for 2 years without being able to name clearly.
Rory McIlroy is a 4-time major champion. The 2011 US Open, the 2012 PGA Championship, the 2014 Open Championship, the 2014 PGA Championship. 4 majors by the age of 25. A pace of major championship accumulation that had the sport building comparisons to Jack Nicklaus before McIlroy was 30 years old. He has not won a major since 2014. That is 11 years, 144 major championship starts across the US Open, the PGA Championship, and the Masters. 11 years of the sport's most talented generation of players, the longest-serving world #1 rankings, the most complete ball striking game in professional golf, and not one major trophy. Between 2011 and 2014, Rory McIlroy played in 16 majors and won 4 of them, a conversion rate of 25%. If he had maintained that conversion rate across the last 11 years, he would have won 9 more majors by now. He would be sitting at 13. He would be the greatest major champion of the modern era. Instead, he is at 4. 11 years, 144 starts, 0 majors. That is not a slump. That is a structural problem. And Harry Diamond, for 8 of those 11 years, had a front row seat to what that structure looks like from inside it. The unspoken promise professional golf makes to players of McIlroy's caliber is that if you stay on the PGA Tour, if you decline the conversations that Live Golf started, if you back the institution through its most vulnerable period, if you give your name and your credibility to the commissioner's narrative, the sport will protect your legacy and give you every competitive opportunity to write the career your talent deserves. That promise was made to Rory McIlroy. He honored his end completely. He stayed, he spoke. He sacrificed political capital that a player with his commercial leverage could have used differently. He was the human bridge between the tour and the players during the years when that bridge was the most important structure in professional golf. And now he has 41 major championship starts into the longest drought in the history of the sport for a player of his ranking. And his caddy of 8 years just told a room of people that the problem lives inside McIlroy's own decision-making architecture. Here is the question nobody in McIlroy's camp once asked on the record. If the caddy who knew Rory McIlroy's competitive psychology more intimately than any other person in professional golf is saying the problem is not the swing, not the putting, not the course management, but the voice McIlroy listens to when the pressure peaks, then what exactly have the coaches, the psychologists, the swing analysts, and the management structure around Rory McIlroy been building for the last 11 years? And more importantly, who is that other voice? Because Diamond was specific. He did not say McIlroy stopped listening to him. He said McIlroy started listening to someone else. Now here is the part nobody is talking about.
The coaching and advisory structure around Rory McIlroy has changed 3 times in the last 4 years. 3 different swing philosophies, 3 different analytical frameworks, 3 different sets of voices in his ear at the moments that matter most. The public narrative around each change was always the same, that McIlroy was evolving his game, refining his approach, building toward the major championship peak that his talent has always promised. What Diamond's account suggests is that each of those changes introduced a new competing voice into the decision-making process on the course, that instead of simplifying the architecture, instead of arriving at a clear, trusted, singular source of competitive authority in the final moments, the structure around McIlroy became more complicated with each addition. More voices, more frameworks, more competing analytical inputs. More voices, fewer answers. 11 years. The caddy is supposed to be the one voice that cuts through all of that, the one person on the course whose sole job is to give the player a clear, uncontaminated read in the moment of maximum pressure. Diamond's account says that role was no longer his, and the person or framework that displaced him in McIlroy's trust hierarchy during those final 18 months is the same person or framework present in every major McIlroy did not close. That connection is now inside 26 player relationships on the PGA Tour, and it is spreading.
The last name you would expect to publicly contextualize this situation in a way that defends McIlroy's decision-making structure is Padraig Harrington. Harrington is a 3-time major champion. The 2007 and 2008 Open Championships, the 2008 PGA Championship. He is Irish. He has watched McIlroy's career from a proximity that most observers do not have. He has been the most thoughtful public voice on the psychological complexity of winning major championships, among players who have experienced both sides, the winning and the long droughts between victories. Is the caddy separation the thing that finally frees Rory McIlroy to win a major, because removing a conflicted partnership clears the decision-making architecture? Or is the caddy separation a symptom of a deeper problem that no personnel change can fix? And honestly, do you still believe Rory McIlroy wins major before he retires? Drop it below, be honest. Harrington's read, communicated through people familiar with his private thinking on the McIlroy situation, is that elite players routinely evolve their advisory structures as their games evolve. That a caddy feeling displaced by a new coaching voice is not evidence of a structural problem in the player's decision-making. It is evidence that the player is searching for something his current structure is not providing. And searching is not the same as failing. Harrington is not wrong that player-caddy separations at this level are rarely clean and rarely involve only one version of events. But here is where even Harrington's measured defense cannot hold the line. Searching for 11 years is not searching. That is something else entirely. Because the specific account Diamond gave, the specific pattern he described, is not a story about a player looking for a better competitive framework. It is a story about a player who already had one and progressively stopped trusting it under pressure. That is a different problem, and it is a problem that a new caddy does not solve. A new caddy inherits the same architecture, the same pattern, the same moment of maximum competitive pressure where the player's instinct overrides the partnership and reaches for something that feels more certain, even when the certainty is an illusion. Nick Faldo changed his swing at the peak of his career. He dismantled a game that was winning tournaments and rebuilt it from the ground up with David Leadbetter, a process that took 2 years, cost him his ranking, cost him his confidence in public, and produced 3 Open Championships and 3 Masters titles on the other side of the reconstruction. The golf world called it the most audacious competitive decision in the modern era. It worked because Faldo gave the reconstruction singular authority, one voice, one framework, no competing inputs in the final moments on the course. McIlroy has been attempting a version of that reconstruction for 11 years, with rotating frameworks and competing voices. The difference between Faldo's outcome and McIlroy's current reality is not talent, it is architecture. And Harry Diamond, intentionally or not, just made that architecture visible to a room that did not stay quiet. The US Open is 5 weeks away, Augusta is 10 months away, and Rory McIlroy is now navigating the most public dissection of his competitive psychology in the 11 years since his last major championship, with a new caddy, a fractured partnership narrative circulating through the tour's locker room ecosystem, and the sport's entire media infrastructure preparing to frame every round he plays through the lens of what Diamond described. That is an impossible environment in which to fix the exact problem Diamond identified. The last player to win a major championship in the immediate aftermath of a public caddy partnership collapse was Phil Mickelson. Mickelson and Jim McIlroy, Bones, one of the most respected caddies in the history of the sport, ended their 25-year partnership in 2017, publicly, abruptly, with no clean explanation. Mickelson won the 2021 PGA Championship 4 years later. But in the period immediately following the separation, the tournaments, the majors, the competitive weeks when the wound was fresh and the locker room conversation was loudest, Mickelson did not contend. The chemistry of a new partnership takes time that a 5-week runway to a US Open does not provide. McIlroy's means caddy does not yet know what Diamond spent 8 years learning, does not yet know the read McIlroy needs on the 12th hole of a final round when the tournament is within reach, does not yet know the voice tone that communicates confidence versus the voice tone that communicates doubt, and how McIlroy's body responds to each, does not yet know when to say nothing. And here is the question that keeps the people closest to McIlroy awake right now. Is 5 weeks enough to build the trust that Diamond's departure removed? Or does McIlroy walk onto the first tee at the US Open with a new bag and the same unresolved architecture that Diamond spent 8 years watching cost him major championships? Because if the answer is the latter, if the departure changed the personnel without changing the pattern, then the US Open is not a competitive opportunity. It is a referendum on whether McIlroy can solve in 5 weeks what 11 years have not fixed. Step back from Harry Diamond. Step back from Rory McIlroy. Step back from the club selection and the target and the voice that replaced the caddies in McIlroy's competitive hierarchy. Look at the pattern. Professional golf has spent a decade building Rory McIlroy's narrative around one question: when does he win the Masters and complete the career Grand Slam? That question has become the sport's most durable story engine. It drives Augusta viewership. It drives major championship preview coverage. It drives the emotional investment of a global golf audience that has been waiting 11 years for an answer. And what has been hidden inside that narrative, consistently, deliberately, by every institution with a commercial interest in McIlroy's continued relevance, is the possibility that the question itself is the wrong question. The question is not when Rory McIlroy wins the Masters. The question is whether the decision-making structure Rory McIlroy operates inside under maximum competitive pressure is capable of producing that outcome, and whether anyone around him has been honest enough to say so before a caddy of 8 years set it to the wrong room. You have watched McIlroy for 11 years. You have watched the talent. You have watched the ball striking that has no peer in the modern game. You have watched the putting breakdowns and the swing adjustments and the psychological frameworks and the caddy changes and the coaching evolutions. You have watched the sport build a narrative around his Grand Slam pursuit that treats his eventual victory as a certainty, whose timing is the only variable. And nobody, not a coach, not an agent, not a commissioner, not a broadcast partner with billions invested in his marketability, has been willing to say publicly what Harry Diamond said privately. The architecture is broken. The talent is not the problem. The talent has never been the problem. The architecture is the problem. This is not about Rory McIlroy's ability to hit a golf ball. This is about whether the professional golf ecosystem, the tours, the broadcasters, the sponsors, the coaching industry, the caddy world, is capable of telling the sport's most commercially valuable active player something he does not want to hear in time for it to matter. One person in that ecosystem broke ranks. He did not do it on a podcast or in a press conference. He did it in a room where he thought the walls would hold. The walls did not hold, and now the sport has to decide whether what came through those walls is a betrayal worth condemning or a truth worth hearing. Is the golf world's inability to honestly address Rory McIlroy's major championship drought a failure of the people around him? Or is it a failure of a sport that has too much commercially invested in his eventual success to tell him what Diamond told that room? Drop your answer right now, because that distinction determines whether the next chapter of this story ends differently. The architecture is visible now. The question is whether anyone uses that visibility. Here is what happens next. McIlroy walks onto the first tee at the US Open with a new caddy, a fractured narrative, and a locker room that now has Diamond's account circulating through it. He plays, he competes, he does what Rory McIlroy has always done. He gives the sport a weekend worth watching. And somewhere in the final round, on a hole that matters, there will be a moment, a club selection, a target read, a decision under maximum pressure, and the new caddy will give his read, and McIlroy will either follow it or he will not. That moment will tell you everything Diamond spent 8 years trying to say. The talent is there. It has always been there. The only question that has ever mattered is whether the architecture around it can hold when the tournament is on the line. If you want the inside story on what McIlroy's new caddy is actually bringing to that relationship and what it will take for this partnership to survive the pressure Diamond's account just put on it, subscribe, because the US Open tee sheet is set and the clock is already running. This story does not end here. It ends on a Sunday afternoon at a major championship, and we still do not know how.